right. We have liftoff. We have YouTube. Welcome to everybody watching by YouTube today. Glad you're joining us, and glad for those who are able to be here today. We are in our study of 2 Chronicles. We're getting into chapter 10. We're pretty much not going to be talking about Solomon anymore, except for a few minutes. But we are moving on from Solomon's story, and we're really taking up one of the central stories in all of the Bible, at least the Old Testament part of the Bible, because we're going to be talking about Israel's division into two kingdoms, which is the result of Solomon's sin, as we're going to talk about. And so significant moment. From here on out, we're going to be talking about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom consists of the 10 tribes that are going to leave. They're seceding from the United Kingdom, and the other two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, which are often thought of as just one tribe. Benjamin's not much of a large tribe, and it is subsumed into Judah in a lot of notations. So this really is a significant moment in Israel's history as a people. Remember, they come out of Egypt and they go into the land of promise, Canaan, and they are a tribal confederation. All the tribes are independent and yet come together for mutual aid and that type of concern. They want a king. They get a king. Saul is their first king. Saul's reign doesn't turn out very well, but David becomes king, and David leads Israel into, solidifies the union of the kingdom, brings it to great glory. Solomon takes it and carries it even further in its glory to a certain extent, but because of some of his policies, Israel will split apart after he dies. So, again, significant moment in the life and history of Israel. And in order to really understand it, we need to go back to 1 Kings for a second. We've talked about how the book of Chronicles, the chronicler, he doesn't tell much of the dark side, either of David or of Solomon. And so if you just depend on 2 Chronicles 10, you've got some questions that come out. Where in the world does Jeroboam come from? If you're reading 2 Chronicles 10 just straight up. I mean, they just mentioned him all of a sudden, and he's coming out of Egypt. Well, who is he, and how did he get there, and what's he have to do with anything? So we need to go back to 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 26 through 40. I've referenced 1 Kings 11 before. The first part of that chapter will give you a list of Solomon's sins. Basically, Solomon, in marrying a bunch of foreign women, brought in their gods and their religious ways, and he evidently participated in the worship of those foreign deities, and that's the main, from the religious perspective, that's his main sin. From the practical perspective, as we've talked about, Solomon's great building program, which built a lot of things, built up a lot of cities, built the temple, built his own house, did grand and glorious things, and of course that takes money and that takes labor. And so the high taxes and the use of forced labor were issues that did not set well with the majority of people, at least in the 10 northern kingdoms. So we need to hear about that, and so we turn to the 1 Kings 11 passage there. It's in the blue on that first page on your handout. And this is where we meet Jeroboam. Jeroboam, son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zereda, a servant of Solomon. He is a servant of Solomon, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow, rebelled against the king. Jeroboam is rebelling against King Solomon. He is a servant of Solomon. He is a very able and capable man, as we're going to see. But because of Solomon's heavy-handedness, in terms of the building program and what it extracted from the people. He seeks to lead a revolt against Solomon. The following was the reason he rebelled against the king. Solomon built the Millo and closed up the gap in the wall of the city of his father David. The Millo is some sort of an earthen mound work. Scholars think they don't know exactly what it refers to, but it evidently required a lot of labor and must have been, the thing that broke the camel's back, right? The last straw. The straw that broke the camel's back. Anyway, it's at this point that Jeroboam wants to, do something about all this. Verse 28, the man Jeroboam was very able, and when Solomon saw that the young man was industrious, he gave him charge over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. We don't know this, how the story plays out exactly, whether he had already made Jeroboam a leader among his people carrying out this work, and that's where Jeroboam got upset, or if he tried to quell Jeroboam's rebellious instincts by putting him in charge of something. Don't know which way that plays out, but he is a servant and he is a leader among Solomon's men, helping to carry out some of this work that he is overseeing. Verse 29, about that time, when Jeroboam was leaving Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him on the road. Ahijah had clothed himself with a new garment. The two of them were alone in the open country when Ahijah laid hold of the new garment he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. He's using that garment as a prophetic instrument. And you see this in Jeremiah and other of the prophets where they take some object and they do an object lesson, children's sermon kind of thing, and they declare God's judgment through it. That's what Ahijah does. He tears his robe or his new garment into 12 pieces. He then said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, see, I'm about to tear the kingdom from the hand of Solomon and will give you 10 tribes. One tribe will remain his. One tribe again, meaning Judah and Benjamin, often thought of together. One tribe will remain his for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city that I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. This is because he has forsaken me. That is, the judgment is because Solomon has forsaken the Lord. And he's done that by worshiping Ashtart, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the Ammonites, and has not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight, and keeping my statutes and my ordinances, as his father David did. Nevertheless, I will not take the whole kingdom away from him, but will make him ruler all the days of his life, for the sake of my servant David, whom I chose, and who did keep my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom away from his son and give it to you, that is, the 10 tribes. Yet to his son I will give one tribe, so that my servant David may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I've chosen to put my name. So he's sparing Judah. He's not taking the whole thing away from Solomon and his descendants because they are David's descendants, and God had promised that he would, hold up David's royal line. Verse 37. Again, Ahijah, the prophet, is speaking to Jeroboam. I will take you, and you shall reign over all that your soul desires. You shall be king over Israel. If you will listen to all that I command you, walk in my ways, and do what is right in my sight by keeping my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, I will be with you, and will build you an enduring house as I built for David, and I will give Israel to you. For this reason, I will punish the descendants of David, but not forever. Solomon sought, therefore, verse 40 is an addendum to what has gone before, a summing up of everything. Solomon sought, therefore, to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam promptly fled to Egypt, to King Shishak of Egypt, and remained in Egypt until the death of Solomon. So there's Jeroboam. That's how Jeroboam comes on the scene. And that's the part that he has. And so, as we'll see, when 2 Chronicles 10 gets rolling, it's going to assume that you know about Jeroboam. Now you do. Because he's going to play a key role in chapter 10. But significant stuff there before you. Solomon's sin is named. God's judgment against Solomon is proclaimed. He's going to tear the kingdom away from him. Remember, God had called Solomon to walk in his statutes as David had, and he warned him, if you don't do it, then I'm going to undo everything I've done for David. And he offers that same challenge to Jeroboam, you just heard. If you do what I tell you to do and walk in my commandments, then you will be blessed and your kingdom will be great. And if you don't, it's not going to happen. Flash forward a little bit, Jeroboam doesn't do any better than Solomon does. And so the history of the northern kingdom is going to be one of continual decline until 721, when they fall to the Assyrians. And that's the end of the northern kingdom in 721. The end of Judah will take place in 596, 587, in that general neighborhood, another 100 years plus after the fact. But the kingdoms are going to be divided, and because Jeroboam doesn't turn out to be any better about following God than Solomon had been, the decline is just going to take place, and it's going to come to nothing. It's going to be destroyed. But that's how we get to chapter 10 of 2 Chronicles. Thoughts, questions, comments about that part of it? Do what now? How did Solomon? Doesn't say. But Solomon is king. And he, every king has his spies. Every king has his men. And we don't know what Jeroboam said after all that happened. And it may have emboldened Jeroboam. And that may be why Solomon, acted to, kill him. So somehow it came to Solomon's, we don't know, we're not told here. But Solomon got wind of it. And I dare say God wanted Solomon to get wind of it. So, we're now in the red text there on the second page. And this is 2 Chronicles chapter 10. We left off last week with Solomon dying. Okay, so Solomon's dead. He's off the charts now. His time is up. And so now his son, Rehoboam. Jeroboam, Rehoboam. I always get them confused. I don't know if y'all do. Jeroboam is the upstart who comes to lead the northern tribes away. Rehoboam is Solomon's son. And so Rehoboam, of course, expects to take the kingdom and to go forward with it. Now, what we're also not told is all this stuff is in the air. And if Rehoboam has to know that there's dissent, and he has to know that there's trouble ahead. Solomon is trying to kill Jeroboam, so Solomon knows that Jeroboam is in the ascendancy, and that's probably only one of a number of people who are, threatening to overthrow the kingdom. This is just the one that makes the difference. So, Rehoboam, a younger guy, probably in his 40s, I've read from some scholarly guess. And so he's getting ready to take over the kingdom. And he knows, that the taxes have been high. I mean, every time taxes are high, the people don't just keep quiet about it, right? We bellyache about it. We make noise. We threaten. And so, he knows that the pot is bubbling. The water is boiling. So he goes to Shechem to be crowned king, but he knows that, this is not going to be easy. And remember, before David's time, David, in getting the kingdom together, that was not easy. And when Solomon took over, that was not easy either. So getting Israel all together as one nation and keeping it all together as one nation, we talk about it being a united kingdom. Well, it was and it wasn't. And you need to look no further than our own country, right? With 50 states. There's a whole lot of different conceptions of what it means to be an American among the 50 different states, related to a whole lot of history and other things as well. So Rehoboam is heading to Shechem, where all of Israel is to be gathered to anoint him king, to officially embrace him as king. So let's pick up there. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. Shechem, by the way, is we don't hear a lot about it, but it is historically a central kind of place, a military, politically central kind of place, religiously oriented as well. Back in the days of Abraham and Jacob, they both worshipped there at various times. There's a lot of history that circulates around it. Shechem is literally right in the middle of the land of Palestine. Jerusalem's down here. That's where you would think he would be crowned king. But Shechem is in the middle, and it has historical warrant. And so, all the tribes can come down there better and gather in that particular point. So that's where they are. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of it, word gets to him, his allies, who are still keeping him apprised of what's going on. Now that Solomon's dead, of course, he knows that what's going to take place. And in parentheses, therefore, he was in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. And you know why. Then Jeroboam returned from Egypt. They sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all Israel came and said to Rehoboam, your father made our yoke heavy. Now, therefore, lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke that he placed on us, and we will serve you. He said to them, come to me again in 3 days. So the people went away. There's nothing mysterious here. We're not going to recognize you as king if you don't stop the taxes, the heavy taxes, and the forced labor, and probably some other things. Don't carry on your father's legacy. We're not going to stay for this. So it's all out in the open. And Rehoboam knows this is coming. So it's showdown time. How do you become king? Important to think about. How do you respond, Rehoboam, to this situation? Everything is bubbling. And now you've got it just laid out before you. If you don't lighten the load, we're hitting the road. So what does Rehoboam do? He goes to his advisors. 2 sets of advisors. The old codgers that his father, who were loyal to his father, and the new young guys who are coming along that he grew up with. This is so current to our world and day. This is what happens all the time, right? The old guard and the new guard. And here's the new king rising up. And, how are you going to handle this situation, Rehoboam? Then King Rehoboam took counsel with the older men who had attended his father Solomon while he was still alive, saying, how do you advise me to answer this people? They answered him, if you will be kind to this people and please them and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. But he rejected the advice that the older men gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and now attended him. He said to them, what do you advise that we answer this people who have said to me, lighten the yoke that your father put on us? The young men who had grown up with him said to him, thus should you speak to the people. That is, this is what you should tell those rebellious Israelites. Who said, your father made our yoke heavy, but you must lighten it for us. Tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. Now, therefore, my father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. In other words, the young guns are saying, bring down the hammer on them. How dare they? Bring down the hammer on them, They're complaining about this. We're going to make it tougher on you. Does this remind you of anybody in history, by the way? In Egypt, remember when the Israelites and Moses is trying to lead them, and every time, they would complain, boom, they got hit with harder labor. By the way, that my little finger's thicker than my father's loins, you understand what that is. You know what that means. It's a bravado kind of thing, in a vulgar kind of way. So he's basically saying, I'm more of a man than my father was. Rehoboam is no shrinking flower. He's pretty full of himself. And he's got the guys around him who are his yes men. And, together, they've been sitting around talking about this day for a long, long time. And, what are you going to do when your dad dies? How are you going to, I'm going to go out and show them who's boss. Like I said, you see this happen in history all the time. And it happened at this time. So, verse 12. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day. It's been 3 days. He's consulted his leadership. You know which way he's going. Verse 13, the king answered them harshly. King Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men. He spoke to them in accordance with the advice of the young men. My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. So the king did not listen to the people because it was a turn of affairs brought about by God, so that the Lord might fulfill his word, which he had spoken by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Do you see what the chronicler is telling us here? This was God's will. God had said, as we read in that 1 Kings passage, I'm going to tear the kingdom away from you. God's judgment has already been pronounced, and Rehoboam is just acting in the way that makes that judgment come into being. We could call this predestination. That's the chronicler's take on it. God ordained this, and so this is what happened. And Rehoboam just played out the role like he did. So that's what Rehoboam says he's going to do. You complained about what my dad did, I'm going to make things worse on you. I'm going to show you who's boss. Verse 16, when all Israel saw that the king would not listen to them, the people answered the king, what share do we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Each of you to your tents, O Israel. Look now to your own house, O David. So all Israel departed to their tents. That is, they said, okay, we're gone. See ya. They took off. But Rehoboam reigned over the people of Israel who were living in the cities of Judah. It seems like, this next verse, that Rehoboam still tried to exert his will on the people where he could. And so he tries. I'll show you guys. Verse 18, when King Rehoboam sent Hadoram, who was taskmaster over the forced labor, the people of Israel stoned him to death. We'll show you who's boss. King Rehoboam hurriedly mounted his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Pretty straightforward stuff. Pretty sad stuff. Rehoboam has, does not exercise the wisdom of his father Solomon. Now, we're assuming that Solomon would have acted in that way. We don't know how Solomon would have acted. As we talked about last week, Solomon was a wise king. And Solomon's wisdom was respected by all in the world in that day. That people came to learn from him. And yet Solomon did not follow his own wise counsel. And he, ended up going against God's laws and commandments and brought this ruin upon himself. That's the tragedy of Solomon's life. And of course, that's the tragedy that could be for all of our lives. It's one thing to be wise. It's one thing to know God's word. It's another thing to live it out. And we're all good about excusing ourselves, holding other people up to the laws and precepts of God while we excuse ourselves here and there as we see fit. The interesting thing to me in looking at all this, thing that came to me, when we hear the 10 northern tribes rail against Solomon's ways as a king, it made me think back to Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 8, that last page there, or the next to last page. I've got it in the blueprint. Remember when the people of Israel came to Solomon? Solomon is the judge over the people in those days. This is when they're in the tribal confederacy after having come into the land of Canaan. And the people want a king, just like everybody else. We want a king. And so God through Samuel tries to dissuade them with these words. These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his courtiers. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and his courtiers. He will take your male and female slaves and the best of your cattle and donkeys and put them to his work. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. But the Lord will not answer you in that day. Samuel warned the people of Israel long ago. And of course, these are the descendants of those people that are playing out. But when you bring a king over you, this is what a king does. And this is what Solomon did. And as we talked about, Israel was glorious and prosperous. But it came with a cost. And the people of the 10 northern tribes, they rail against Solomon's policies. And you can hear Samuel from his grave just saying, I told you so. But again, Rehoboam, the lessons are obvious. The wisdom of the elderly versus the rashness of the young is on display here. It's not that, those with age are always right, but, they do have some wisdom to pass on. And they certainly had wisdom here. If Rehoboam had entered into the situation more carefully and had, shown the 10 tribes that he was willing to make some concessions, he could have. He could have kept the kingdom together longer. He could have figured a way out. Maybe not. But the young guns, we're going to show them how. We're going to show you how to rule. We're going to show you how to make things happen. We're going to rule you with an iron fist. You're going to be sorry that you ever brought any of this up. And so they brought ruin to the nation. Again, from the chronicler's perspective, it was already in the works because that was God intended to bring about this division of the kingdom, and in his knowledge of what was to come and of Rehoboam, that played out exactly as it did. Again, straightforward story, but a central moment in the history of Israel. And we see how it comes about. And it's a terrible tragedy. But again and again, it plays out again and again in history in every land, just about. Thoughts, comments, questions about any of this? As we move forward, we'll be talking about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom goes by the name Israel. The southern kingdom goes by the name Judah. Gets confusing from time to time, of course, because the United Kingdom was known as Israel, and we talked about the people of Israel. But when you hear that word Israel used in the chapters heading forward, you should think first about the 10 northern tribes. And when you hear Judah, you should think about the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, which is situated Jerusalem, and so, the southern kingdom. And so all that takes place going forward will be about the kings who rule in the northern kingdom and in the southern kingdom. Anything else to mention, ask, say? They didn't go anywhere. They just stayed. They didn't go anywhere. They kept their territory. They stayed where they were, but they would not hearken to Rehoboam's rule. They just weren't going to obey him. And so when that one note there about how Rehoboam tried to get his taskmaster to carry out his work, and they stoned him to death. He did that in some part of the northern tribe territory. He tried to exert his will, and that was what they did. They just, get out of here. They stoned him to death. And so, so you think about the military, and the military is situated all throughout the country, but it becomes, who do they, who do they obey? And the northern tribes, and again, Jeroboam has been at work behind the scenes. He's helped to create this division himself. Which is to say, he has helped to get all these people together around this cause. And so, and remember, the kingdom always, the tribes always maintained a sense of their independence. That's what scholars will stress again and again. Even though you talk about it being a united kingdom, they're always the tribes. And they always have their tribal connection in their minds first and foremost. And so for there to be a king over all of Israel was always a dicey proposition. You needed a really strong personality, strong person to do it. David was a great one to do it. Solomon, evidently, because of all his major works that he did, was able to do it too. But, he also had enforced labor, and he also had the heavy taxation, which eventually did him in. But they were always united to an extent. It really is, if you think about American history, especially, 150, 200 years ago, the sense of individual states being their own entities, was stronger in the beginning than it is now. But everybody saw themselves first and foremost as a resident of their state. So, today, if you're a Texan, you're a Texan. I dare say that you think of yourself as a Texan first and an American, second. Not that they disown America. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying there's a strong sense of identity as a Texan. At least that's my perception of things. That's what I've been told by some other ministers who have ministered in Texas before. And they've said, it's a different place. There's a and it's not bad. It's just there's a strong identity. And there are several states that have that kind of identity, I think. So, that's the tribes of Israel were always going to think of themselves first and foremost as their own particular tribe. It was always a tenuous kind of, the king over Israel was always a tenuous proposition. And, it just couldn't hold together, ultimately. So, anything else? All right, we'll pick up in chapter 11. Rehoboam is in charge, and everything goes great in the northern kingdom. No. We'll see how it didn't go so well to start with. All right. Thanks all. Again, we're going to meet through June, and then in July we'll take off the month and come back in August at some point for our Wednesday Bible study time and all. Thanks to all who've been watching by way of YouTube, and thanks to you all. Hopefully it's not raining anymore.